In this part, we are going to add two states to our character, idle and run, that we'll use to control animation. We are going to use these to set the foundations for a more complex character. But with that, let us get started. Back to my game scene, the first thing we're going to do is work on Mannequin. So I'm going to go Ctrl-Shift-O to open the Mannequin scene and create an animation tree. Set up the animations for the character. Select Mannequin and look for the animation tree node that we're going to add. The animation tree needs an animation player to play animations from. So let us assign the character's animation player node. We're also going to create a tree root for it. So this tool allows you to create an animation tree in the bottom panel that opened for us. We're going to select an animation node state machine. This is a simple state machine system and editor that allows us to create animations as nodes with transitions. And we're going to use that to create our character. So by default, you're on the select tool. You want to use the add node tool, the second icon from the left. Click anywhere in the editor to add an animation. We're going to start with idle. I'll put this out of the way. So let's create the idle animation as a node and click somewhere else to add the run animation. From there, we go back to the select tool and click and drag to select an animation node from which you can then change the animation or some settings in the inspector. Now, so this is a base state machine that we can't use for the character. It doesn't allow you to do hierarchical state machines with enter and exit functions and those kinds of things. This is really for animations. But we can do one thing that's really nice using the third tool in the icons in the top left to connect nodes. So let's select that. And from there, you can click and drag from one node to another to create a transition. If you don't have a transition between two nodes, you can't go from one animation to the other. However, once you've created a path, you can go, in that case, from idle to run. But we can't go from run to idle unless we click and drag from run to idle to add a second transition. When you select a transition, you can see when the transition is selected that has a few options and features in the inspector. And that's the power of this system here. It's that you can wait for the animation to end before you jump to the next animation. You can add some fade time so you can crossfade between animations, those kinds of things. We will use that a bit later in the course, but for now we're going to use immediate transitions. So we just need these two animations set up and select the animation node select tool, select idle, and we're going to set it as the start of our graph. So you have the autoplay button like on the animation player that you can use to set idle as the starting point of your tree. With that, you can fold the animation tree. Note that on the animation tree node, you have an active property that needs to be on for the animation tree to process. And we will have to activate that from our script. We're going to do that in the Mannequin script now. I'm going to move back Keymon to the bottom of the screen and get coding in our Mannequin class. I'll close the other tabs and we're going to first, so in the ready function, set our animation tree to active. So I'm going to create a variable to store a reference to that. OnReady variable animation tree. It's going to be of type animation tree. That, and I'm going to get the animation tree node. So we're going to set animation tree.active to true to start with. This will make the animation play and the graph process. So we'll be able to go to the run animation later. From there, here's what we're going to do. So we need some way for the player scene. I'm going to open it now. We need some way for the state machine here to access the animations in the Mannequin skin. And we're going to create that interface on the Mannequin script that we're working on. So I'm going to list the possible states for the animation tree. Those states are going to be idle, run, and we'll add air that we will code in an upcoming video for our character. So then the element that handles transitions in the animation tree is an animation node state machine playback in our case. That's specific to the animation state machine that we chose as our tree root here. So let's create a new onReady variable after the animation tree. Let's call it playback, and it's going to be an animation node state machine playback. And we're going to get it, so it's accessed that way from the animation tree. You have to use the brackets to access it a bit as if you were digging through a dictionary. And we want to get a key called parameters/playback. It's a bit hard to know, to be honest. Even if you check the docs, they are not complete right now. So you kind of have to dig through the source code of Godot at the time of recording, right, to figure out how all of this works. But with that, we can use a function on that animation node state machine playback called travel. It's the last one in the docs. That is going to transition in the graph using pathfinding, actually. So when you have a more complex animation graph with more nodes, this class, animation node state machine playback, what a mouthful, is going to travel using the A-star pathfinding algorithm. So it's going to go through the intermediate nodes before it reaches its destination. We'll see that again a bit later in the course, but for now, we're going to create a function that we'll call transition2, just like in our state machine, because after all, we are working with an animation state machine, and it will take an ID, a state ID from our states in num. This function is going to change the current animation in the tree. So we're going to use the match keyword and check what state ID is. If it's states.idle, we're going to travel to the idle animation or idle animation node. Then you can select these lines and press Ctrl-D to duplicate them. If it's states.run, we're going to travel to the run node in the animation tree. And we're going to add a default one. If we use one that's invalid, we're going to go to the animation node or try to travel to it. Note that even if you try to travel to a node that's not reachable from the current state, the advantage of using that system is that it's going to handle the error for you. It's not going to crash the game or anything. Lastly, note that we're using state IDs. Instead, you could choose to directly work with text strings and directly travel, call playback.travel, or have a function that directly travels to the string that you pass to the function. But using IDs like these makes it so if we change the name of the animation nodes in our animation tree, we only have to rename them there, and we can very easily add states in our enum by adding a comma and a new state like fall, land, or whatever.